The Icons of Real Estate Podcast. Are you ready to learn the proven money-making secrets from top-producing Icon agents? Ready to skyrocket your business? This podcast is for you. Tune in every week with your host, Tomasz Fonseca, and find out how to implement proven strategies to 10 times your business, from $3 million to $30 million in just 12 months. Brought to you by the Masters at Real Estate Marketing, Arter SEO.
Welcome to the Icons of Real Estate Podcast. I'm Tim Calloway. I've got a great guest for you today, Dana Fitzpatrick from Fitzpatrick and Company, a realtor in Seattle, Seattle's east side, Bainbridge Island, and Mercer Island area. Dana was actually voted by Bainbridge Island residents as the best realtor of 2021. And the best part is, and what I'm most excited to hear about, and we'll probably hear a little more about it at the end of the conversation, he's actually visited over 45 countries. We could probably talk about that for some time. Welcome to the show, Dana. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, let's just start at the beginning. How did you get into real estate? I know you had a little bit of different background starting out. Tell me how you got started and how you got to where you are today.
Well, I actually I started my career in corporate America and worked predominantly in product and marketing. Was a consultant for a while. Was a retailer for a bit. And really had a very strong career, but always felt like I always wanted to go into real estate. And even in my career, I found that I was really trying to pull myself to things that were more human, that were more centered on that human experience. And I think probably around 5 years ago, I kind of came to the realization that it's like, this won't happen unless I just make it happen. And so I made the decision at that point to at least do a feasibility in terms of what I thought I could do in the real estate market and what kind of, service niche I could have. And determined that I could find a path forward there. So I've kind of a more traditional business background with an MBA and kind of these, succession of roles from, a product manager to vice president. But ultimately, that has served me really well in moving into real estate because of that business discipline.
Right. So tell me a little bit about that transition. So, is it just day one, you go, okay, goodbye, corporate America. Day two, you walk into your own office, or, did you start with a team, or how did that look?
Well, so I started with a business plan, and I started with really kind of the pillars of what that business plan would be. So what was my market niche? What did I want to be known for? What did I think my growth rate could be? What did my sphere look like?
Right.
What was the feasibility and kind of the cash flow possible for a business? And then I looked for a mentor. And that was really important to me, is that not only did I felt like a lot of people would comment and say, like, hey, if you do 3 deals the first year, you're going to do great. And that 3 deals your first year will be 6 deals your second year. And that after 6 deals, you're going to do 10 or 12 deals. And that was really not very gratifying for me to hear that. And so I really went and said, okay, I'm going to intern. Like, I'm going to go back and kind of cast away all my hubris and just say, whatever you need done, I'm going to do. So if you need flyers, I'm going to do flyers.
Right.
And if you need to put signs up, I'm going to do signs. If I'm going to attend well inspections, I'll attend the well inspection. And I felt like more than anything, you needed to get that momentum in order to be able to practice real estate.
Right. So have things changed for you now that you've evolved so much into who you are now? You talked about, I'll come in and I'll put out flyers. I talk to folks all the time on the retail side that are like, we still do a lot of the basics that they were doing, 30 years ago. I tell the story all the time. It was when I was 14 years old and I wanted to buy a moped. And so my neighbor was a realtor and she gave me flyers in my hand, and I canvassed neighborhoods and I got like $20 a day. So, is there still a lot of boots on the ground, or do you see more of the transition, like with social media and things like that, or is it amalgamation of the two?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. I feel like that's something that keeps me up at night a lot. Like it's something I spend a lot of time thinking about.
Yeah.
Um, and one of those things is it kind of comes back to me thinking back to my corporate career and being a manager there, and that idea of what is your highest best purpose.
Right.
And so at some point you maybe have the skill set to do those things and you can go canvas your own neighborhood, but is that your highest use of your time? I have 5 children, and so I am a very regimented individual. My schedule is very specific and very orchestrated. And so I am trying to be smart about the things that don't need me to be part of the process.
Yeah.
And to recognize that when there is a better process to be had and when you are the limiting factor. So that happens to me a lot. And I've really tried to put good people around me so that I'm not sacrificing growth for um, because of my own limitations and my own time management.
Right. Right. So interesting enough, you have 5 children, and I want to get into
Mhm.
family here in a little bit, but I want to first kind of talk about the integration, balance, people call it different
Yeah.
things of that and what you do, because being in the real estate market and to be successful, you have to do successful things, right? You have to do
Mhm.
things that make you successful. And that's a lot of time. Sometimes it can be a 7 day a week, 24-hour a day project. How have you balanced that? And, is that working? And how do you do it?
Well, I don't think it ever works. I feel like every day is a dance. And
Yeah.
a lot of that's a question I think women get asked a lot,
Yeah.
it's like, how do you do it all? And like the reality is I don't do it all. And I had been a working mom forever. And when we started having kids, years ago, my husband was a medical student and, it was not an option for me not to work. And
Yeah.
so then you really kind of step down and say, okay, well, if I'm the breadwinner, like I'm going to show up the next day. Like I'm going to show up and I need to take this seriously. And then you start thinking, well, what am I going to feel more or less guilt around? Like, you're going to feel some guilt somewhere, somehow, some way. So what are you going to feel more guilty about and what are you going to feel less about? And I kind of came to the realization that like I never really felt like guilty if someone else gave my child a bath.
Right.
And so when I come home, like it's hilarious now because my kids still treat me like I'm a rock star because I'm like, I'm going to
Good.
delegate the things. Like I haven't done a load of laundry in years. Like I
Wow.
don't do any laundry. My husband does a lot of that. My husband has a very flexible work schedule. And so he's home a lot. And but I just have made the decision to not feel guilty about those things. Because there's, the two limiting resources are always time and money. And so you can solve one for one, and
Right.
it's not always elegant, but at the same time, like if you're not working on your highest best use and you're not really working your plan, you're going to sacrifice them both.
Yeah, for sure. My spouse and I, we kind of almost do the same things. We're in
Hmm.
opposite offices right now, but our children are 29 down to 22, so we've kind of passed that
Hmm.
phase. Never felt a day of guilt about any of it in our life, and nor should you.
No. Well, and
Uh,
I think my kids see that I work hard,
right.
and they see that, and they see, and I think a lot about, especially now. I don't think when I was working in like a high tech, like a skyscraper, that they had the same appreciation for that, but they see it all the time now. So like when I'm out in the community and people come up to me and go, "Oh my gosh, your mom did XYZ for me," and I can tell that they're proud, and
Right.
they're proud that they are part, that I'm doing this for them. They're
Yeah.
proud to participate in it. And I really like the fact that when my little ones were little, they would put on heels and say like, "I'm going to the office,"
Nice.
instead of saying like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have a wedding.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a really important thing to role model for young girls, especially.
Sure. Yeah, for sure. Being a role model inside the home is where it all starts.
Mhm.
So before we get into a little more about, that side of your life, I'll ask one more question kind of about business and what we know where you kind of came from. We see where you're at now. Tell me, where do you see yourself and Fitzpatrick and Company? Where do you see that over the course of the next 5 years?
Well, that's interesting is I feel like every quarter, I feel like there's been a big market change, whether it's interest rates, whether
Yeah.
it's the pandemic, whether it's coming out of the pandemic. And so I have actually tried to be a little bit more micro focused on what my projections are. Like my goal this year was like my first 2 years, I had tremendous growth. So like my first year, I think I did 30 some, 35, 36
Nice.
transactions. And my second year I did 50 something. And this year I'll probably be in the 40s. And I actually feel like that's okay. Like I feel like you can only perform what the market performs. And
Right.
so that's my goal. Like my goal is to think about market share. My goal is to think about penetration. My goal is to lower my bottom line so that I'm more profitable. And so that's kind of the metrics that I'm working within my business right now.
Gotcha.
Top line, I'm less worried about because I feel like the market has to dictate that.
Yes. And I just want to discuss bottom line real quick. I saw
Mhm,
you do have a team.
mhm.
Obviously, everyone that has a team, their bottom line is so important, because most of your best assets walk in and out the door every day, right? What is it taken to build that team, and what do you look for in your team members?
Um, well, I think I look for cultural fit probably more than anything, is and just a real spirit of generosity.
Hmm.
I have team members who are more junior, and are kind of growing in their career, and I think that's great. But even that said, like it's a full partnership. Even though I probably produce more revenue and more
Hmm.
leads and more sales, it's still that partnership of having those people around, and executing to the best on behalf of a client. That's really probably what I look for mostly is like the ability to orchestrate well within a group
Right.
so that roles and responsibilities are defined, it's trusting and reliable, and it creates a really, really positive client experience.
Do you ever see yourself moving out of production and purely into, running the team, or, building that brand entity, Fitzpatrick and Company?
I could, yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it depends on what I find satisfying. And right now, I find the product of a house to be really interesting and gratifying.
Nice.
So I'm not one to like I can feel areas where I would start to feel like it could be rote. And so I suspect there's times where if I start to, feel that um, something is repetitive. And this happened to me recently. Someone was complaining about packing and they were like, oh, it's really hard to move. And I was like, yep. And it's like, but I was not as empathetic as I wanted to be. And I was thinking like it's probably time for me to focus on something else in the business for a little bit, because when I stop being empathetic, then I'm not
Yeah,
really in it. I'm not really in it.
sure.
But the idea of a home is so loaded with symbolism and with functionality, and it's an investment vehicle. It's a gift for many folks. It's a part of their estates,
Sure.
and so I really like that element of it right now. But I can't deny the fact that like my head definitely leans more towards business.
Yeah. You think that comes from your background?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yep.
for sure. Yeah, it's a interesting dance, you'd mentioned that term earlier. It is an interesting dance when you start building that team and you start seeing the opportunities around you developing, and you're like, okay, and they're not fires at all. It's not like go put out the fire, go put out the fire, go put out the fire. It's let's
Mhm.
go build, let's go build, let's go build. Let's satiate these things. So yeah, it's definitely, and it's enjoyable though, and I can totally relate to the empathy part of it that you talked about at the beginning of the conversation. It's very important to at least acknowledge it from the beginning, right? The only way to work around it is acknowledgement.
Mhm.
So let's talk about the fun stuff. Name every country you've been to. No.
Mhm.
Tell me about your travels. 45 countries plus. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Last time I counted it was 45. And I don't actually know if I have a direct number. I love to travel. So, and obviously with kids, like we travel less, than we used to.
Yeah.
But I make it a pretty big priority. I spent a lot of years doing international business, and so I spent a lot of
Okay.
time just, seeing different places and sometimes really enjoying the culture, and sometimes like just having a stop in and spending some time at the Hilton. So I can't say like I've had like really, really quality
Right.
cultural experiences in all those places, but I do really love to travel. And then, and two of my children are adopted internationally.
Oh, okay. Fantastic.
So yeah, I have a son from Ethiopia and a daughter from Haiti.
Okay.
And so we have spent a lot of time in those countries in particular.
Gotcha. Any favorite places or anywhere that's of utmost interest that, say, those of us that are not world travelers or have been to 45
Yeah.
countries that we should definitely see and not pass up?
Well, so I will say I finished my business school in Paris. And so that's kind of always been like a very soft spot for me. And I recently took my kids, two of my kids there and and that was a really fun experience with family to go back and visit there. My favorite city ever is probably Istanbul in
Oh,
Turkey.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really just a loaded with history, loaded with like so much depth around the cultures and the religions and the wars that have come through
Right.
there. The food's amazing. So there's I think a lot of like my travels is, my desire is just to eat better. And like I love to eat good food.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I always say, and I haven't traveled abroad that much, onesie twosies. But I always tell my kids now that they're adults and they're developing their own
Mhm.
families and things like that. We're going to Italy next year, and and then my son on his honeymoon's going to Greece. And I always say, there's just so much out there that was here, that was there
Mhm.
thousands of years and thousands of years before our 200 some odd years of existence here in the States. And those are the places that I really feel, and it's pretty much everywhere, right? I mean,
Mhm.
outside of the North American continent, but yeah, fascinating, and I'm envious. So definitely fantastic.
Mhm.
Okay, so we're winding down here, and I always like to, as most of our listeners know, kind of like give the floor to our guests, and if there's anything kind of last word of the day you'd like to share.
No, I recognize that like it's been challenging for a lot of folks, and I think my greatest kind of piece of advice has been just to go back to the basics and work the system and experiment and set up for the next year, because I think a lot of folks have really felt very unsteady coming out of the last couple months.
Sure.
And not that that will change dramatically, but I know for me, like that's something that's really like having good business planning and good mechanics is probably going to be a big part of what leads me into 2023.
Fantastic. I think that's great advice on the business planning end of it. Far too many
Mhm.
come into the business, or even, gosh, far too many have been in the business for some time and have they wing it, or maybe they had a mentor and
Mhm.
they're following in those footsteps. But put a BP together, put a business plan together, and follow it. And I'm sure there's great success behind that.
Mhm. Yeah.
If someone
Yep.
wanted to go ahead.
No, no, no. I totally agree. It's the
Yeah.
document I use every single day. Every
Yeah. I
single day,
mean,
I use my business plan.
they don't give you one when you take the exam.
No.
It's we make that joke a lot. They should give out a plan for success, after you take the exam. Uh,
Hmm.
okay, so how can people get in touch with you? If they want to reach out to you in the Seattle area, or even maybe just come to you for some advice, how can they reach out to you?
Yeah. So I would say the website, it's danafitzpatrick.com. That's probably the easiest place to find me. Otherwise, you can follow me on Instagram or Facebook at Dana Fitzpatrick.
All right, fantastic. Dana, thanks so much for being on the show. I really enjoyed it. A lot of words of
Thanks.
wisdom there. So I'm sure our listeners are going to enjoy it very much. You have a great rest of the
You
week.
bet. Sounds good. Thanks.
Nice
Bye.
talking to you. Bye bye.